I spent the last few days going over a lot of the photographs you don't get on the mainstream news, where they show you the sanitized war, smart bombs, and soldiers giving out chocolate to children. And it's what the American troops and the British too and others are doing over in Afghanistan and Iraq. And it's awfully disgusting. Incredibly disgusting. But at the same time, it's what I expected. I knew what was going on because they have raised on purpose the generation, the particular generation, to do exactly what they're doing. They created the culture for them. They gave them their morality, if you like, just like Bertrand Russell said they would do from kindergarten onwards. And they also gave them video games which were designed initially years ago, long before we had the internet, designed for the military alone, because it was to desensitize soldiers so they would kill their target without thinking, without even having any idea, really, there's a real human being there. That was just a target to kill on impulse, a Pavlovian-type training. And that's why they had the big push many years ago now to give this kind of game-playing role to the children, to bring them up on it, to desensitize them. And now, of course, they're coming out and admitting that in some of the papers. Not only admitting it, but telling us we're going to push it further, and that the military-industrial complex and the governments are behind it because they want a militarized, desensitized next generation to take over and perhaps be even more ruthless, because this is to be 100 years war, like Mr. Rumsfeld said. We should listen to what they say, because these characters, in amongst all the lies they give us, will tell us little things, little statements they make, where they tell us the true psychopathic truth. And we ignore it because we don't want to hear it. It's the bad news. And I'll be back with more of this bad news and telling you what's behind it after the following messages. With cutting through the matrix. And just to confirm what I've been talking about for a long time, in that the culture you live in is basically promoted and indoctrinated into you. There's nothing in it that doesn't have a purpose that serves elite, nothing at all. There's nothing in it whatsoever for you. You're taught to think there is. You're taught to think you just compete with everyone else, and you get to the top, and nothing is further from the truth. Even your hobbies and the things that you do are promoted to you, and your children are indoctrinated from kindergarten onwards, and you even buy them the games that they demand from you, because the advertising industry ensures through their cartoons and all the rest of it, these video games are shown, and they'll demand it from you. Everything is highly manipulated. And in Australia, it's already, I think, the 22nd. But getting back to this particular newspaper, it's from the I think it's the Sydney newspaper by Fran Malloy is the one who's written this up for this Sydney. I think it's Morning Herald, I think they call it. And let's see if we can get it. Yeah, Sydney Morning Herald, 22nd, that'll be, because I say they're ahead of us. And it said here, various commentators have accused Generation Y, those born after 1981, of being disrespectful, constantly distracted, unable to live without a mobile phone, contemptuous of authority, cynical and precocious. A more unlikely batch of soldiers just couldn't be imagined. But this much maligned generation is precisely the target that the US and Australian defence forces are homing in on their efforts to keep the war on terror well manned, and their key recruitment strategy, the humble video game. Now this goes for Britain and all the Commonwealth countries, Canada, and the US as well. In fact, they just had a military tank, a couple of days ago come up Yonge Street in Toronto with some cup that some team had won. So that once again they're using that as an advertising promo for recruits. So a tank going up Yonge Street certainly dispels Canada's old image of a peace-loving country. But I'll continue with this newspaper article. It says here, their key recruitment strategy, the humble video game. More than 3,800 U.S. soldiers have been killed in action since the war in Iraq began more than 5 years ago. And as the conflict drags on with no end in sight, the U.S. military is running desperately short of the 80,000 new recruits it needs each year. As a horrific reality of the bloody conflict that tears potential recruits back home, it seems that the U.S. Army is pinning its hopes on a video game to solve one of George Bush's biggest headaches. America's Army is at www.americasarmy.com. It's a key component of a drive by U.S. forces to sell military careers to an increasingly cynical young demographic who ignore billboards and TV advertisements, and who, by being plugged into the internet, fly firmly under the radar of traditional marketing. Military recruitment has huge support from the U.S. government, and ain't that a fact? Controversial legislation passed in 2001 compels high schools to release contact numbers of graduating students to recruiters. Your personality profile will be in there too, so they'll know exactly who to hit on you to get you in. But with an estimated 73% of U.S. teenagers surfing the web at least weekly, nowhere is youth more readily accessible than in the gaming space. And with more than 8.6 million users registering to play since 2002, America's Army is successfully hitting its mark. The game is a realistic and immersive tactical first-person shooter, a free download with online multiplayer capabilities and extensive input from some of the world's top game developers. Reviewers have raved about the high production values with sound effects and visual detail among its best in its genre. The game requires a relatively significant commitment of time. Experienced gamers estimate that it takes at least 2 hours to go through the training modules before you can log on to play the game. The realism of the game is no surprise given its source. Then it goes on to list a lot of the other ones who participated in creating this game, and it's all the biggies. And it goes on to tell you that the U.S. military is putting lots and lots of money into this, and so is the American government. So, of course, will be the British, the Australian, and every other Commonwealth country government. They're putting money into video games to get the children hooked on a fantasy, and also to train them to just kill the enemy target. And when they go over abroad, and no doubt in this game they'll be using the clothing of the target that they'll eventually be set against. That's the kind of world we're living in now. And you think you're all free. You think that your children are free. And here you are being indoctrinated and allowing your children not just to be indoctrinated, but to be basically brought up with a military mentality and a killer mentality. And you think that's okay.